the big, huge finding that really scratches the surface of a lot of like cultural assumptions, especially in high performance, is this big cultural conversation we have about strengths. And, you know, find your strengths, follow your strengths, the strengths are everything, and, you know, take the strengths finder, figure out your top 5 strengths, follow those, don't do anything else, or, you know, at least know what they are and really aim your career to that, or aim your behavior towards that, or, you know, use that as a guide for recognizing pattern. And by the way, I'm all for that. That's all great. I'm that guy who says, you know what, any self-reflection you do, I'm cheering you on. Like any assessment, any tool that makes you look at within inside, I'm like all for it. It's just that strengths are not highly correlated with long-term success, right? There's not a lot of data and there is not a lot of research that has shown it leads to long-term success with the positive outcomes associated with what we care about in psychology, which is we care about happiness, we care about health, and we care about your positive relationships. And this myth that, oh, we'll just follow our strengths to, you know, to the promised land is just not true when you actually talk with high performers. Because my favorite question, and if anyone's down this, just go up to anyone who's good and say, were you always good at that? And they'll be like, no. They'll be like, not at all. Well, did you always have an inclination to do every element of what you're doing really well? No. Like me? Man, I sucked on stage. This year I've talked to 60,000 people live. Well, this is really important because this idea that our strengths are going to give us everything, it's just not true. I sucked speaking on stage. Matter of fact, I was terrified of it. Terrified. But one reason I love your show is because I had that intention of, I want to make an impact. And when someone actually asks and kind of owns that, like when they say, do I want to make an impact? And the answer is yes, and they own it. They realize they're going to have to develop. They can no longer leave their growth to randomness, because if they do, they'll always be mediocre. And they realize, I got to become something entirely above both of those. That's what most people don't see. They're like, we made this binary false conversation, right? It's not a true sort of choice here. It's a false dichotomy, we call it, right? It's not strengths or weaknesses. Many of you, if you have a big dream, a huge goal, you got to become something entirely above and beyond any strengths you even know about, feel, or own, and go way beyond any weaknesses you've ever even addressed or even you know about, because you're going to discover so many new strengths and so many new weaknesses on the path that it's almost irrelevant what they are now. It's what's the goal and build into that. You know, I didn't know how to write. I get a lot of critics who are like literary guys about my books because every book is different, right? 6 books, all of them different. And the reason they all read differently is I am challenging myself as a writer to develop, to get better. Every book I write, I'm going to write this like nothing I've ever written before. And I go to work at building a new skill set to be able to write. Like Manifesto, I researched for 2.5 years just how to write it.
Wow.
Not what to write, how. How do I get that pentameter? What was the rhythm in which revolutionist rhetoric was spoken in or written in? Just to understand that took me 2.5 years. So I had no conceptual understanding of it. It wasn't a strength. It wasn't on my radar.
Part of the reason that people don't take the leap is because you're stepping outside of your zone of certainty. But no one ever made their dreams come true in their field of certainty.
Dude, you have the best memory. Remarkable.
Dude, I was really into the book and just everything, so that makes it easy to remember that stuff. But like, how do you train to do that? Like, how do you get better at that?
So something that I've learned from, and you know, over the course of the journey, there's the people who I spoke to for the book, but there's also people who I got incredible advice from along the way. And one was Drew Houston, the founder and CEO of Dropbox. I think I was like 20 years old, and you know, it's a pretty cool brunch to be having. I'm sitting there with him and I'm asking him similar questions. And he told me something that was amazing. He said, the problem people have with dealing with uncertainty, which is uncertainty is entrepreneurship. That's the difference between being an employee and being an entrepreneur, is the entrepreneur takes on the uncertainty, right? Drew said the key that people misunderstand about uncertainty is that you're not born with it. It's a muscle. And people just assume that because they don't have it, it's not for them. He said, if you think of uncertainty as a muscle and you train it like a muscle, things start changing. Let's say you haven't worked out your biceps. You don't go to the gym and just start lifting the 60-pound dumbbell. No, you start with 2, and then you go 5, and you go 10, and then you take, a couple days off. You have to, have rest days. If you think of it the way you train a muscle, all of a sudden uncertainty becomes this manageable thing where you start small and you work your way up. And something that Drew said that I love, he said, when you feel the pain, that means you're working up a weight class.
That's cool.
And then he said, when you pull a muscle, like psychologically, if you've taken on so much uncertainty that you're having a panic attack, you're way too high in your weight class, tone it down a little. It doesn't mean it's not for you, but if I've done it, you're lifting weights and you pull something, all right, you're gonna go down maybe 10 or 20 pounds the next time you go into the gym.